sorry, deer in the way. Like I said, I'll start churning out the videos to catch up. I have a bunch. I have to kind of still proofread them, basically make sure I didn't violate HIPAA and embarrass myself or something like that, you know. So, but this video, a recent encounter, and you know, my videos are mostly geared to stuff you're not going to learn in nursing school. It's stuff, it's not going to be written in the books. It's not going to be given in a report. No one's going to, you know, put their names to it. I'm not putting my name to it. But I think that is a good portion, a significant portion of nursing. And it's unfortunate because you can't teach a lot of this. A lot of this is going to be experience. You learn on the job. You know, the nursing school, NCLEX, that just qualifies you to get your license. You know, okay, congratulations, you have your license, now learn to drive. Same thing, you got your license, now learn how to nurse. So, what happened recently, I was doing my rounds, I was charged, so I was checking on the other side. You know, we have a north and south side. The north charge is the head charge. There's another charge, there's co-charge, basically. But the north charge is the idiot that's, no offense to, because I'm rarely north charge, I'm usually south charge, but it's the progressive side and med surg side, and I hate it. I don't mind working the progressive side, I just don't like being charged and having progressive, because we get an assignment too. So I was doing my rounds, I see one of the techs fuming, you could see she's fuming, and there's a patient calling, and her patient, I was like, hey, what's going on, you know? And she's like, he's pulled off his condom cath again. And I was like, oh, is he not with it? She's like, no, he just likes us putting it on. You will encounter sexual harassment one way or the other, whether they mean it or not. I had another patient, we were putting a condom cath. This is even like, I don't know, a couple weeks before. He's like, stop jerking me off. Obviously not with it. We're like, no, sir, it's nothing like that. We're not getting any or giving any pleasure here. This is not what it's all about. But this guy, the one I'm talking about with this tech, yeah, he kind of, he figured out the formula where he's like, well, they're gonna come back and put it on. And, you know, he was looking out the door saying, hey, you know, I need to be cleaned up. I need to have condom cath put back on. You know, so I'm walking by. I know the nurse. She's a relatively new nurse. The tech is not. She's very veteran, and she's just fuming. You know, and I said, look, I'll put it on. No problem. Sorry. My life is full of craziness, and that's one of them. The tech was like, sure. You know, I was like, yeah, no problem. So I gathered the stuff up, or she gets something for me. I walk in. I say, hi, sir. How are you doing? And I introduce myself. I say, I see you pulled your condom cath off. And he's like, yeah. He thought there was only women on the floor, I guess. There was one other male nurse, but you know, he was not getting involved, I guess. And there lies some of the lesson here. So I put it on. Man had a semi-erection, lost it very quickly, but his condom cath stayed on for the rest of the night, magically so. So the lesson there is, you know, the textbook will teach you, hey, this is sexual harassment, this is blah blah blah, this is how you gotta educate the patient. You know, the educators will tell you that, the managers will tell you that, the administrators will tell you that. That doesn't work, does it? You know, it doesn't work. You know, guess what? You know, it's like I was saying to somebody else about some organization. They're like, oh, if you tell them straight up, they have to, by the law, stop. I was like, something tells me they're not going to. Someone who's already flouting the law, you know, just not paying much mind, because I was like, are they supposed to be doing that in the first place? No, but it's the law. I was like, yeah. Something tells me if you go through all that trouble and do confront them, they're still gonna bust your chops, right? That's the reality of stuff. That's older adults. We understand that. We see that. You have to be inventive. You have to be a little bit more inventive of how you deal with things, issues, people. And that was getting the point across to this patient that, hey, no, it's not going to be that way. We're going to educate you this way. Right as rain, no problems afterwards. So you got to be aware. I'm not saying that, hey, you stepping in as charge if you're a female isn't going to really help too much. Maybe, I don't know, you can couch it a certain way and say you and your partner kind of really, don't do this too often. I don't know, whatever, just to put the guy back on his heels a little bit, or if you could find a tech trade-off and trade assignments, or ask one of the male nurses to step, or male techs we have actually a lot of male techs to do that. But you have to think outside the box, per se, because their stupid little box is pathetic. And that's something you're going to find as a new nurse, that, yeah, they have everything in writing. How effective is that writing? The instructions, it's like IKEA instructions, put A to B to Norwegian letter. What letter is that? It's like, what? Do we have a letter with 2 dots over it? Doesn't exist. What is this? What letter? Is this a backwards R? What? Where's that part? So you gotta deal with these issues as they come up. And guess what? When you're charged, it all comes onto your head. Again, another rant of mine is like, if I'm going to be the manager, I'm going to make managerial decisions. This is mostly about this incident, but that just triggered another scenario where, my friend was working 4 in a row, and on her 4th day, they floated her to our sister unit, and we had 2 travelers working. And the unwritten rule, or even the written rule somewhere, is travelers float first. That's just the way it is. Full-time staff, which she is, have preferential selection of assignments and treatments. That's just the way it is, because they're putting in full-time commitment and hours and whatnot. And that was a failing of the charge. And I said that to her. She wasn't charged. She was actually charged the night before. And she's like, yeah, I should have just wrote it in. And I said, yeah, you should have. And she was like, no, then I would have been written up, or they would have talked to me. I said, they can talk to my butt. They could then take away the charge powers then. All right, then don't make you charge. You said, oh yeah, I wish. That's because nobody likes charge assignments. Only some people, power-hungry people, and then they like to abuse that power too. Anyway, I was like, use your magical powers for good. In my sense, I stepped into there. I didn't even ask the nurse involved. I just went right to the tech. I said, I'm going to put a new condom cath on them, and we're going to do it this way. The nurse was very happy I did. She deferred to me. Obviously, like I said, she was a brand new nurse. She didn't know how to handle it. My other friend, she's relatively a new nurse, but she's charged. She was charged before. I said, no, you should have just gone to the charge, and the charge should have done this. And I knew the charges of either unit, and frankly, they were experienced enough that they should have, but they are also sticklers to the rules. And that's what I'm talking about, the rules. They're following protocol, all that stuff, and that's fine. But in that scenario for my friend doing her 4th night, there was nothing to lose by following unwritten protocol. There was no penalties whatsoever, because they were travelers. You can move them around however you want. They're wild cards. But she was finishing up 4 in a row, and she would have had continuity of care, would have placated her, would have made her assignment easier. The travelers would have gotten a new assignment regardless, whether they got on our current unit or the sister unit. It didn't matter. They weren't working the night before. It was a brand new assignment, right? For her, continuity. I mean, I could make the argument. I could say, well, don't make me charge. Or, I have charge powers. I'm going to use my charge powers. And that's what I've been trying to instill upon the new generation. Say, look, if you're given responsibility, use it wisely. You're given authority, power, and responsibility. You don't just shirk it and say, no, I'm just going to follow along with the crowd and keep my head down and what have you. Yeah, you can. And there's nothing wrong with that. But why not use that power or authority or responsibility for good, for what you're supposed to? That's what being a manager is, making an executive decision. And I always say that to these guys. I say, look, being an executive doesn't mean you're right all the time. Look, these yokels, right? And they're like, oh yeah. I said, yeah. Guess what? You're gonna make bad mistakes or wrong mistakes. Don't make bad mistakes. To make the decision. That's executive power. That's executive authority. That's being an executive. Right or wrong, you make a decision. Not making this a decision, that's not being an executive. That's being a peon. That's being a follower, and that's whatever. That's my critique. That's my personal view on it. Okay? Good luck to you guys. Hopefully I start turning these out again.